Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to a special edition of Sports4CLE from the Great Lakes Collectors Convention, Independence Fieldhouse. I'm Dave Bacon, and some special guests today on the show. To begin with, Nick Wilson, 92.3 The Fan's Afternoon Drive. Nick, we can never have you on the show because you are on live on 92.3 The Fan when we're on, so we appreciate the time.
Well, I'm happy to be here, and my only clause in coming on is that it would be on during my own show, so that I would be competing against myself. And this is all about my ego today, and I thank you for letting me, do something in service of my own ego.
We can guarantee a win if you're competing against yourself.
Look at that.
There you go.
I'm already winning. I haven't opened any cards yet, and I've already won.
All right, let's begin. Let's talk about the Browns. So, big news, obviously, the Deshaun Watson trade. Didn't go well the last 6 games after the suspension last year. Let me ask you this. What would constitute a success for the Browns with the Deshaun Watson trade in your mind?
So it's a two-parter. The one, and probably most important, is Deshaun's play validating the trade. Last year, I probably liked his play over the course of those 6 games more than most. At no point did he look like a franchise quarterback. At no point did he look like a guy worth $230 million guaranteed. But I thought the last 3 games he really teased us with some playmaking ability. It wasn't enough for people, though. It wasn't enough for the greater Cleveland. So he's got to play like the guy he was in 2020. The other half of this is they've just got to get out of their own way and win games. I mean, it's that simple. You can, Deshaun could have 5,000 passing yards and 72 touchdowns if the Cleveland Browns aren't winning this year, and just winning more than you're losing. Before we even get to the playoffs, get to 9-8, get to 10-7. That's really when we're going to be able to start to talk about the success of this deal. But I don't think just one thing can happen. I think it's got to be both, because it was the boldest and riskiest trade the Cleveland Browns have ever made since maybe going back to Paul Warfield for the number 1 pick that, or maybe even the trade that brought Bernie to town. That's the stakes. So if one does well but the other doesn't, it's not going to satiate the bloodlust for success in town that you have when you trade for a player on the scale and to the risk that is Deshaun Watson.
Do they have to get to a Super Bowl?
Yeah.
That's the move that, that's the kind of all-in move this was.
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole reason why you trade for a franchise quarterback is for the ability to not just contend for a Super Bowl, but to contend for multiple Super Bowls. Like that's the magic of Mahomes. It's not that Mahomes can flick his wrist and throw a 90-yard touchdown pass. It's that every year, like this was the rebuilding year. Kansas City was rebuilding this year. They won the Super Bowl. That's the Mahomes effect. And when you give up 3 firsts and multiple seconds and multiple thirds, $230 million, and you know what? Not that I'm trying to relitigate this in any way, but bringing a quarterback with the allegations and the lawsuits against Deshaun, yeah, the success is high. So winning a Super Bowl, that's the only way we could definitively declare this trade worked and it was worth it. There are other ways that, okay, you make a Super Bowl, maybe you make a couple AFC title games, but shut the door. The only way to really slam the door, at least one Super Bowl win.
The other thing that we touched on a little bit, the numbers for Watson the last 6 games were not good. Bottom of the barrel metric-wise for quarterbacks with a certain amount of snaps played. How much of that it was really Jacoby Brissett's offense, because it had to be because he played 11 games. How much of it was, man, this guy hasn't played in 3 years and he's in an offense that isn't his?
So I think it's equal parts that, and I think you have to throw in a dash of a guy who's got a new normal. And I just think, and I'll be honest with you guys, I was most wrong on the Deshaun Watson rust factor. Because I said, I don't care.
Yep, me too.
That's a him problem, that's a Browns problem. Now, in fairness, his struggles were not all his doing. It felt like the Browns, offensively, were just kind of throwing things at the wall to see what would stick. That's not how I would have preferred them. As a matter of fact, I came away feeling like it was more on the Browns than it was on Deshaun, specifically to the second half of those 6 games. The first 3 games, he just wasn't good. And he wasn't accurate, and he wasn't in rhythm, and he wasn't comfortable. The last 3 games, he was finding rhythm. The last 3 games, he was finding that explosive step that he has, and it felt like the Browns had already decided, well, we're not going to win, or we're not going to go to the playoffs, so let's just go ahead and send it out. And I got to be honest with you, I really don't like that. And the number one reason is you're in the midst of trying to sustain a winning culture. You had a leg to stand on. Yes, you were 4-7, but Jacoby and the Browns were trying to win every week. To then get to a point where you're still mathematically in it, and all right, well, we know what he did well in Houston, but we're going to go ahead and we're going to poke around. We're not going to run things out of the spread. We're not going to do this. We're not going to do that. It felt like, in a way, they failed him at the end of the season more so than Deshaun failed them. That can change real quick, though, in week 1 if he goes out and really just can't cut it.
Yeah, if they tailor an offense to him, which is what they should do, I think that cures a lot of what was going on those last 6 games. Now, as we get ready for the offseason program to begin, you hear Greg Newsome has switched agents. Now, he's come out and said he didn't demand a trade, but I don't know, that something there says he's not quite happy.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think a lot of people shouted down that report because we don't want it to be true. I mean, let's be honest. The Browns could not afford to trade Greg Newsome. Yep. Just in terms of the optics alone. You have 1 of 2 first-round picks Andrew Berry will have made going on year 4 in Cleveland. Greg's one of them. The other's Jed Wills. And the jury is way out on Jed Wills. So if you were to trade him for what would be less than the value, less than what he played up to last year, you'd be shooting yourself in the foot. You don't have, and listen, the cornerback room is the one room you could afford to make that trade from. But it's really tough to see them getting back that commensurate value. Now, I don't know that he asked for a trade. I think there was probably, he was moved halfway through the year into the slot because of the emergence of MJ Emerson. I bet you that he got a little afraid that his long-term value was being attacked. That should be something that you can, speak to with the new defensive coordinator, but I think it bears watching. I think a lot of people just said, oh, well, he denied it, Schefter denied it, Mary Kay denied it, so it's over. I think this is a situation we should watch all the way into the season. And remember, just because they don't trade him before the draft or just before they don't trade him before the season, everything's fair game. And if he struggles or if he's a malcontent, I think this is one of the real key situations because that depth in that room is extraordinary.
Yeah, and again, you can alleviate some of that by saying, we value you, we're going to take care of you. But again, if I'm him, it's like, show me.
Well, and the tough thing is, since he's going to year 3, he can't get a contract extension for 11 months.
Yep.
So the easiest way to say, let's chill, let's go ahead, we're going to go ahead and we're handling this, is to pay a guy. We can't do that. So really, you got an 11-month clock here to prove it to Greg Newsome. And the good news is, he is a good kid. Like, this isn't what Elijah Moore did in New York, where they were winning and Elijah Moore asked for a trade. Greg Newsome's a really good kid. So I think it's going to work itself out. But if you're the Browns, you can't. If I'm Andrew Berry, I kind of got to stake, and Stefanski, I got to take stock. This is a kid that we drafted. He was a really great rookie. Last year was a mixed bag. But this is a kid who could be a starting outside corner in the NFL, which is one of the 4 hottest commodities you can have. How has this gotten here? And, organizations like to play the game. It's always on the player. No, I think Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski are smart enough to understand their role in this. And that's what I hope comes out.
Before I let you go, got about a minute. Jim Schwartz, how big of a difference does he make for this defense? And what do you expect the identity to be?
So I think it's huge, and mostly because I think all of a sudden you're going to see guys start to develop. The Browns have a lot of guys on this roster who are underdeveloped, And I actually think this is the perfect job for Schwartz because he's going to run the wide 9 zone defensive line, and that's going to be good for Miles. It's also going to be good for a bunch of part-time guys that they're treating as starters, young guys like Alex Wright. So I imagine that they're going to be able to get a lot of pressure this year. And with these cornerbacks, if you get the right amount of pressure, you're going to be able to get turnovers. So I think it was the perfect hire. I think he's going to be here long term, which allows you more stability. They were in a tough spot, coming off 2 straight losing seasons. I think they got as good of a defensive coordinator as you could, and that checks out good.
Agree with you wholeheartedly. Nick Wilson, 92.3 The Fan, Afternoon Drive. Thanks so much for the time. Appreciate it very much, Nick.
Anytime, buddy. Appreciate you.
All right, Nick Wilson, make sure you check him out. 92.3 The Fan's Afternoon Drive. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. More of this special edition from Sports4CLE from the Great Lakes Collectible Convention here at Independence Fieldhouse. Stay with us.
Better days are ahead. Be ready with the training you'll need to get a great job. If you or your family has experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with full tuition assistance. Whether you want to improve your skills, get certified, or train for a new career, go to tri-c.edu to check out our programs and resources. So what are you waiting for? Register now for online and on-campus summer classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just a mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
COVID-19 has changed how we show up and show out with our family. Now it's time to take the first step that lets us get back to talking smack with a side of mac and cheese.
Before we can safely come together, we need the facts.
As COVID-19 vaccines become available, you may have questions.
Should I get it?
Is it safe?
Should I wait?
It's smart to question. Now, get the facts at getvaccineanswers.org so you can make an informed decision when vaccines are available to you.
This special edition of Sports4CLE from the Great Lakes Collectors Convention, Independence Fieldhouse, Independence, Ohio, continues. We turn our attention to the Cleveland Guardians, and we are happy to be joined by Zack Meisel, Guardians beat reporter for The Athletic. Zach, Josh Bell, a big name free agent signing, struggled, has started to get his stride. How important is that to just kind of set up this offense in this lineup?
Yeah, we can nitpick who's hitting where and not coming through in certain situations and whatever you want. But at the end of the day, you think about a guy who signed a 2-year, $33 million contract to be sort of that linchpin in the middle of the lineup. He's the key to everything, I think. I mean, they spent all winter, all spring talking about how he'd be the perfect protection for Jose Ramirez. He's a switch hitter. He's a guy who historically makes a lot of contact, doesn't strike out a ton, but hits for some power. And so I can only imagine in his mind feeling pressure to perform when you get off to such a slow start in front of new teammates and a new fan base. And I think it's easy to see that, right? He just looks like a guy who has the weight of the world on his shoulders. And I think you can tell his first home run, his first hit in a key situation, those things help ease the mind so much that then he can get back to doing what he knows he can do.
And his struggles, you can tell he's swinging at pitches he normally doesn't. He's getting fooled a little, which tells me he's not seeing the ball real well. And then he's falling behind and trying to do. You could see what was going on with his at-bats.
Yeah, I mean, you can look at the metrics and they'll show he's hit a ton of ground balls. It feels like every time you watch him at the plate, it's chops one to second, chops one to first, and that's not who he is. And in talking to him and talking to the hitting coaches, it's pretty simple. It's that he got off to a slow start, and then you have this mindset of, I really need a hit here. So you're defensive, and you're late. That's what happens. Is it's just you're waiting for them to make the perfect pitch to you instead of being the aggressor and dictating the action. So when you're late, that's why you're not making good contact. You are chopping the ball to first or second base, and you get the results that we've seen.
Starting pitching. Somehow they're finding a way to get through it, but McKenzie, 60-day IL to open up a roster space. Savali, 15-day IL. How much of a concern is it?
Yeah, they need to figure out the best short-term plan and the best long-term plan, and do those things align. And if they do align, it probably has something to do with some of the top prospects they've got sitting at AA and AAA. But I think for the time being, at this moment, they're just sort of trying to piece it together any way they can. And I don't think they anticipated having Peyton Battenfield make his major league debut against the New York Yankees 2 weeks into the season, but you can't script these things. So they have depth. Like, it would have been much easier to deal with these injuries in June than in early April. I think that's sort of the quandary they find themselves in, is just, can they just get by for a few weeks with some of these fringe roster type starters before they call up their top prospects, or do they need to make a decision sooner than they might be comfortable doing? Those are the questions they're going to have to answer, and the way they answer those questions is the performance by Hunter Gaddis, Peyton Battenfield, those guys. So it's going to be fluid for a while.
And the top prospects you're talking about, Logan Allen, not the guy that was here before, the younger one, is doing really well in AAA, as is Tanner Bybee, Gavin Williams at AA. All three of those guys are pitching lights out. Let's talk a little bit about Battenfield, though. It seems like any time they dip down into the minors, the guy they bring up isn't overmatched at the major league level. How impressive is that, and how do they continue to do that?
I mean, it has to be the lifeblood of your organization when you don't spend as much money and you're not leaning on free agency. You need a really healthy player development system, and they've done that. I mean, they have a consensus top 3 or 4 farm system in baseball, and more than that, it's always the names that you don't see on those lists, right? Like Shane Bieber was not a top prospect. Savali and Plesac came up in 2019 and carried the rotation for a little bit. Those guys weren't top 100 guys. So, yeah, it's an impressive feat to know when to call up the right guy at the right time. And they seem to have a really good handle on that. And they'll tell you it's just collaboration. It's people in different departments looking out for the best interests of the player and the best interests of the team and making sure that aligns. And you don't need to hear me try to analyze it because the results speak for themselves, right?
It's the sign of a well-run organization, though. And, say whatever you want. This is a organization that develops young pitchers like no other organization.
Yeah, and they're trying to do the same thing with hitters, and I think you're starting to see that. And in a similar fashion, I mean, think about last year and the hitter like Oscar Gonzalez, and you have to give credit to the players. They're not just sprinkling fairy dust on everybody and turning them into capable major leaguers, but Will Brennan coming up last September, and it was a very short sample, but he looked like he belonged. And you see now, he's going to go through some growing pains, but this isn't all bright and shiny and new to him. They've done things in a methodical way, and I think they just have a good handle on the timing element. And I think sometimes, if you rush a guy too quickly, it could be both damaging for the team and the player.
Let's talk a little bit about the bullpen. It's been lights out. It's had to be because of the challenges with the starting pitching. Some concerns there. They're throwing a lot.
They've had the most innings pitched by their bullpen of any team, and that's not a stat you want to lead the league in, whether it's mid-April or mid-September. So part of it is they need their starting pitching to go a little deeper to take some of the pressure off. But it's like last year where it seems like every game that they win by 1 or 2 runs. So you're going to be leaning on Karinchak and Stefan and Clase, and you don't want to burn those guys too early. You want to get them in a good rhythm, and I think the thing that helps them is like Nick Sandlin has pitched in big moments, and Eli Morgan has pitched in big moments, and when you can trust the guys that you have to turn to on days when maybe Clase is not available, Karinchak's not available, that's what makes a really good bullpen, having that depth. They should get Sam Hentges back pretty soon. That'll help too. So, yeah, bullpen's another strength.
Let's talk a little bit about the lineup. Steven Kwan, that's a guy that kind of burst onto the scene, could have got more votes than he did for Rookie of the Year. He was that good as a leadoff hitter and kind of set the stage for this offense. And he looks like he's right back at it.
It's unbelievable. I mean, he didn't look like a rookie last year.
Right.
And so it's his skill set is just so unique, and the way he approaches every at-bat, I mean, he looks like he's been in the majors for 10 years and that he knows every single thing the pitcher's trying to do to him. It doesn't seem to matter if it's a lefty on the mound or a righty on the mound, a guy throwing 100 or a guy throwing junk. He's just going to give you a really good at-bat. And, he's so good at he has such a good handle of the strike zone, such elite contact ability. It's, if you're drawing up the ideal leadoff hitter, he's got a lot of those qualities.
Let's talk a little bit about Miles Straw, too. That's a guy that, didn't hit for an average last year, is hitting really well this year. And I thought he would hit well. He's doing even a little bit better. Looks like he's changed his approach a little bit.
Yeah, they wanted him to be more aggressive. It's actually similar to Josh Bell in some ways, where last year got off to a good start, had a good April, and then things went south, and it became, again, that mentality of just trying to survive instead of dictating the action. And you can fall into a deep abyss when you do that, and it's just so hard to crawl out of. And then you start thinking, all right, if I make this adjustment, if I tinker this way and this way and this way, and next thing you know, you're just completely lost. And he's similar to Kwan in that really good handle of the strike zone, elite contact ability. But if you're going to be overly patient and just go up hoping to draw a walk, you're going to fall behind 0-2. And that's what happened last year. His pitchers just started throwing him nothing but strikes, and he was being too passive. So he's been a little more aggressive so far this year. And the big thing for him, no one needs him to hit 320. You don't need him to get on base 45% of the time. If he could just be an okay hitter, just not a black hole in the 9 spot, he's going to steal 40 bases. So that's a huge asset to have in the bottom of your lineup.
And him 9, Kwan 1, if I'm a pitcher, I don't want to deal, or a catcher, I don't want to deal with that.
Right. In today's game, it's so critical to have pitchers who just rack up strikeouts so that you can get out of those jams. Well, if Straw gets on base, odds are he's going to steal second, and then you got to deal with Kwan with a runner in scoring position. That's not fun.
All right, before I let you go, Andres Gimenez, they signed him to a 7-year contract. He's been better. They thought he was going to be good. I don't know if they knew he would be this good. And outlawing the shift, how important is that defense at second base? And do you think that changes the thinking? Maybe he's better off staying there as opposed to switching to shortstop.
I think it's a good luxury to have. He can probably be Gold Glove caliber at either. And yeah, at one point, right around the time he signed the extension, I tried to poke a hole in his game somewhere. I just looked at all of his splits, and he's good against lefties, he's good against righties, he's good on the road, he's good at home, he's good against, he's good at day games, good during night games, good in a dome, good outside. You can't find anywhere. He's just so consistent across the board. That's hard to find. Especially it feels like Cleveland has platooned several spots in their lineup year after year after year. And to have a guy like that who you can hit second, you can hit fourth, doesn't matter where he's hitting because he's going to produce. And that's just such a luxury to have. And I know he's thrilled to have that contract. I think the team is going to be thrilled with how that contract shakes out in the end, too.
And still a young player as well. So ascending as well. Zack Meisel, appreciate the time so much. Appreciate it. Thanks.
You bet. Anytime, Dave. Thanks.
Zack Meisel, outstanding Guardians beat reporter for The Athletic. Make sure you check him out. Always really insightful stuff on the Cleveland Guardians. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. More of this special edition of Sports for CLE from the Great Lakes Collectors Convention. Stay with us.
Better days are ahead. Be ready with the training you'll need to get a great job. If you or your family has experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, try Seek and Help with full tuition assistance. Whether you want to improve your skills, get certified, or train for a new career, go to try-c.edu to check out our programs and resources. So what are you waiting for? Register now for online and on-campus summer classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a line. A long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
COVID-19 has changed how we show up and show out with our family. Now it's time to take the first step that lets us get back to talking smack with the side of mac and cheese.
Before we can safely come together, we need the facts.
As COVID-19 vaccines become available, you may have questions.
Should I get it?
Is it safe?
Should I wait?
It's smart to question. Now, get the facts at getvaccineanswers.org so you can make an informed decision when vaccines are available to you.
This special edition of Sports4CLE from the Great Lakes Collectors Convention, Independence Fieldhouse, continues, and we are pleased to be joined by Kenny Roda, longtime sports talk host, currently working WHBC in Canton. Kenny, appreciate the time. As we sit here and talk before Game 1 of the Cavaliers, when this airs, it will be after Game 1. So let's talk globally about this playoff series. When you look at this series, biggest concern for you?
Darius Garland. That's my biggest concern. Simply because of the physicality of the playoffs, and Darius is more of a finesse player as he finishes at the rim with layups. You don't see him dunking like Spider Miller does, and bringing the house down. And that's just his style of play. And in the playoffs, especially with a team coached by Tom Thibodeau, they're going to blitz him, they're going to double team him, they're going to get physical with him, and he gets a little loose with the basketball, especially late in games as the pressure rises. And so the physicality for him is my biggest concern. And yeah, they played in the play-in tournament last year and lost 2 games, and if he thinks that's what the playoffs are going to be like, no, it ratchets up about 10 levels. And so that's my biggest concern. I know what I'm going to get out of Donovan Mitchell, right? The stats tell us he'll raise his scoring average 3 to 4 points in the postseason. He has 2 50-point games when he was with Utah. He's been in the playoffs every year, so you know what you're going to get from him. I think, even though he's never been to the playoffs, I think I know what I'm going to get from Evan Mobley from the defensive end, and then hopefully they don't ignore him on the offensive end, because I think he can be a big factor in this series. I don't know what to expect from Darius Garland in a 7-game physical series, first time in the playoffs. So that's where my biggest concern is.
Fair to say, when I think of Darius Garland, he can score. I need him to control the tempo of this series, because the Knicks don't want to get into a half.
No.
They shoot the ball well, but if you have to play the Cavs half-court defense, it's like getting your gums scraped.
Absolutely. It's excruciating, because they have the rim protectors, and Jared Allen, who's back healthy, and Evan Mobley, who's one of the 3 finalists for Defensive Player of the Year. So, yes, they're small in the backcourt on defense, but if you get by Mitchell or Garland, you've got to deal with those 2 protecting the rim. And the pace of play leads to the Cavaliers being the best defensive team in the NBA, right? They slow it down, so it shortens the game. So, yes, they're good defensively, but also there's less opportunities to score, so that's why they're number 1. So you're right. New York wants to run up and down, turn it into a track meet, and Darius Garland can't get caught up in that. Yes, you want to run when it's there, okay, and try and score easy buckets in the postseason, but you don't want to get into a track meet where all of a sudden you're turning the ball over, you're not getting a shot at the rim, and that, again, goes back to where I think, and it's a good point by you, he's got to be careful in controlling the tempo. But the good thing about that is I think Donovan Mitchell will handle the ball as much as DG does in this series, and he understands that from his experience.
Yeah, I think Tom Thibodeau is going to try to speed him up any which way. they're going to, and they had success. Now, Jared Allen didn't play. The game they played, I think it was March 31st.
Right.
They scored 130 points on the Cavs' really good defense,
right,
because they got into a running match because the Cavs ran early. So that's one of the things that I want to see. And if it means Darius scores 18 points or 22 points, great. Dictate the pace.
The numbers I will be looking at for Darius Garland are this: field goal percentage, turnovers. To me, smart shot selection and valuing the basketball. And to me, that's like you. That's more important than him getting 30. You give me, 18 points, 10 assists, 1 or 2 turnovers. That's a great line in the playoffs because scores are going to be lower in the postseason. And the other thing we're all waiting to see, and we're taping this before Game 1. Isaac Okoro, listed as questionable the last I saw. We'll see if he plays. Same with Julius Randle for the Knicks. But and I never thought I'd say this because I'm not an Isaac Okoro fan, they need him defensively in the fourth quarter for Brunson, right, while Mobley's guarding Julius Randle possibly. Those are their 2 biggest offensive weapons. So we'll see if Isaac can't go, or if he tries and he's not close to what he was when he wasn't hurt, then who's going to guard Jalen Brunson? Is it going to be Donovan Mitchell to accept that challenge? Because I don't have faith in Cedi Osman, Lamar Stevens, not even Karis LeVert defensively against the Jalen Brunson.
The bench is a concern. Manuel Quigley will get votes. He might be the 6th player of the year. Who's an X factor for the Cavaliers?
Well, the obvious is Karis LeVert because he's the most, and he wasn't consistent early in the year, but the second half of the season, he's been pretty consistent. So you need him to be that same Karis LeVert second half, not first half. But Ricky Rubio has been awful this year, and I know he's coming back from the ACL tear, and so he's probably not even close to 100% even though he's playing. But you need to give Mitchell and Garland at least 6 to 8 minutes of rest time, right? I'm expecting Garland, Mobley, Mitchell, and maybe even Allen, but I'll go those 3 for sure, to play 40-plus minutes a night because you shrink your bench in the postseason. But should one of those guys get in foul trouble, dare I say, you don't want to talk injury, but you need another ball handler, another guy that can give those guys a rest, and you're not in the negative going up against a deeper, better New York bench. So for me, Karis LeVert has to be consistent like he was in the second half, and you need a Rubio or a Danny Green, who they picked up, late in the season, but didn't play much because he was still, getting used to the Cavs system. Then he allegedly got sick, maybe it was COVID, whatever it was, and he only played the last 2 games, but he was very effective in the last 2 games shooting. He may be a step slower defensively, but he's better to me than Lamar Stevens, and Cedi Osman, and anybody else.
Yeah, he's a guy that has been there at the biggest moments, can hit a big shot. The moment isn't going to be too big for Danny Green.
Last 4 minutes of a game. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Danny Green on the floor for both ends. We'll know early in the series if he's ready to play by whether or not JB plays him at all. Because for a while there, I'm saying, why aren't you playing, Danny Green? What are you waiting on? And then he was sick, and then the bench is definitely an advantage for the New York Knicks.
Kenny Roda and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. We will have more of this special edition of Sports4CLE from the Great Lakes Collectors Convention, Independence Fieldhouse. Stay with us.
Better days are ahead. Be ready with the training you'll need to get a great job. If you or your family has experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with full tuition assistance. Whether you want to improve your skills, get certified, or train for a new career, go to tri-c.edu to check out our programs and resources. So what are you waiting for? Register now for online and on-campus summer classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a line. A long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just a mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
COVID-19 has changed how we show up and show out with our family. Now it's time to take the first step that lets us get back to talking smack with a side of mac and cheese.
Before we can safely come together, we need the facts.
As COVID-19 vaccines become available, you may have questions.
Should I get it?
Is it safe?
Should I wait?
It's smart to question. Now, get the facts at getvaccineanswers.org so you can make an informed decision when vaccines are available to you.
The special edition of Sports4CLE continues from the Great Lakes Collectors Convention, Independence Fieldhouse, talking with Kenny Roda from WHBC Radio. Kenny, let's shift our attention a little bit to the Browns. In my mind, the biggest off-season additions, Jim Schwartz and Bubba Ventrone. What are your thoughts?
They needed to make a move defensively, right? I mean, it just wasn't working. And so at first we saw it was the defensive coordinator, Woods gone finally. Then you're like, well, when are they going to get rid of the special team? They finally did, right? It took a while. And Bubba, of course, cut his teeth in the NFL, made a living as a special teams guy in Cleveland. People know him, so I like that pickup. But Schwartz on defense, I thought this was the best move. Like when they went out and got Terry Francona 10, 11 years ago, right? Phenomenal, best free agent signing the Dolans have made since they've been the owner. And you can laugh, he doesn't play, but Tito makes a difference. I don't know if Jim Schwartz will have the same effect because he's just the defensive coordinator, but based on recent history in the defense and how poor it's been, I thought it was an outstanding move. And quickly you saw that they adapted to his style of play, which is rush 4, drop 7, and hopefully get to the quarterback with only 4 guys. That's what he did when they were successful in winning the Super Bowl in beating New England when he was with Philadelphia. So I love the pickup there. Now he's got to mold that defense to the style that he likes to play. And they went out and what did they do? They addressed the defensive line, defensive end, defensive tackle immediately in the offseason. And to me, that was no surprise that they did that.
So the thing that I liked about Jim Schwartz and Bubba Ventrone, they are different personalities than Kevin Stefanski. And I think Joe Woods and Mike Prefer had similar personalities. And I don't think you can have that from a coaching staff unless the head coach is really loud and right. Really, kind of pound. And that's not Kevin Stefanski. And if he's not that guy, he can't create that.
Right, he can't fake it. They'll know, right? So you're right. Totally different personalities with those guys. And Bubba, not too far removed from playing, so he can relate to the guys, especially the special teamers. And Jim's, I don't want to call him ancient, but he's a lifer. So, this guy has had success. Yeah, not all the time, but, he's going to get after you and let you know what he likes, what he doesn't like, what you did right, what you did wrong, constructive criticism. And they needed that because Stefanski is just kind of, okay, yeah, well, we played hard and, I'll take the blame. That was I got to look at the film. Yeah, no, you need somebody to get in their face, raise the voice level. Not quite maybe as come get some, Greg Williams, from a few years ago, but a little bit closer to that than Stefanski. So from that standpoint, personality standpoint, approach, philosophy, these, I think, were 2 good moves.
I agree. The other thing is, what do you expect this defense, what will its identity be? And as I think about that, I couldn't tell you what the Browns' defensive identity was under Joe Woods. I just couldn't.
Right. Pressure. That's what Schwartz is all about. And so whether they can generate it with that front 4, okay, and that's occasionally they're going to blitz. Don't get me wrong. It's not going to be like, well, they never blitz, right? They're going to pick and choose. But what they want to do is, and it makes sense, if you can rush 4 and still affect the quarterback, that means there are 7 guys back there in the passing lanes in coverage, and your chances of breaking up a pass or maybe creating a turnover are greater in the secondary. But you also hope to maybe create some turnovers with the pressure in the backfield. So we'll find out if that style is going to work with the talent that they've assembled on this roster.
Yeah, and they want to create chaos at the line of scrimmage.
Yep.
And that plays into some of the strengths of their defensive backs at the line of scrimmage as well.
I'm excited to see Jeremiah Wusu-Koromoa and a healthy JOK from where they drafted him and the season that he had before injury last year. To me, he's a guy that's going to benefit greatly in the linebacker safety hybrid position, whatever that is. But the secondary too. And they need to be better on the back end. And maybe, and I don't know when Anthony Walker will be back, the linebacker. I think they missed him from a communication standpoint. That's why guys were running free down the middle of the field for, big touchdowns, broken plays, whatever you want to call them. So communication on the back end is going to be mucho importante. And maybe Anthony Walker can settle that in the huddle. If not, then those guys all need to be on the same page in the secondary.
Let's shift sides of the ball. Offense. What do you think the addition of Marquise Goodwin, who signed end of last week,
right,
and Elijah Moore does for this offense?
It's better in the wide receiver room than it was. I'm not doing cartwheels and somersaults. I don't think it elevates them to a top 5 wide receiver room in the NFL, but it's better than what you had. So, we always hear the term in the sports cliches, take the top off the defense, got to get vertical. Well, yeah, this offense needs to do that. So which one of those guys will be able to do that? And does Jakeem Grant, who's the punt returner who got injured early last season, does he maybe add some of that as well on offense, or is he just going to be on Bubba's special teams? Don't know. But at least you have some guys that can possibly do that. Like Anthony Schwartz has been a bust since they drafted him.
Yep.
They're not going to cut him, I think, before camp starts. They're going to give him a chance because they drafted him, and you hate to cut draft picks that are taken in the first 3 rounds. Makes you look bad as a GM. But if he doesn't pan out, then they're probably going to move on from him. But you hope that one or both of those guys make an impact with this offense and with Deshaun Watson throwing the football down the field.
Here's what I hope happens. I hope that defenses play off Elijah Moore a little bit and Marquise Goodwin, because those are easy yards. If they're playing 5-6 yards off him, you get him the ball. That's 4 or 5 yards. If he breaks a tackle, it could be a touchdown. There was nobody that got easy yards in this. Everything was like a fight in a phone booth for him.
They can take a short pass and turn it into a big play or a touchdown, right? Crossing patterns, get the speedy guys, quick guys over the middle, and create some havoc, create some yak yards after catch. So yes, if they have to provide that threat, and it has to be there on film for teams to play off, so they respect that. And if they do, then you have that opportunity, maybe not to get a big play every time they throw that, but maybe it's 5 yards and you needed 4 for a first down, and you move the chains and keep the drive alive. So, those guys, along with Amari Cooper and Donovan Peoples-Jones, right, and David, they need to use David Njoku more, in my opinion. Chief needs to be used more for first downs and in the red zone. Yes, he's not the most sure-handed guy, but he's gotten better, and he's so athletic. And in the red zone, that's somebody I think they have to focus on a little more too.
How big of a year is it for Kevin Stefanski, given that he has an elite quarterback that he can build an offense around? You say what you want about Kirk Cousins, Baker Mayfield, Jacoby Brissett. This guy has a different skill set, and I want to see what Kevin Stefanski. I think he has a great offensive mind. Are you going to give him the freedom to do the things he does well?
It's a make or break year for Kevin Stefanski. Donovan Mitchell, Deshaun Watson, I don't think he has to play well. For the money they're paying him, they'll go as far as he takes them. But if he has a bad year, they're not going to cut him because they owe him the money. So that's why I say it's not a make or break year for him, but it's an important year for Deshaun Watson. For Kevin Stefanski, I think it is a make or break year. They can't go 7-10 and miss the playoffs now that you've had Deshaun Watson for 2 years, even though he only played 6, but he's in your offense. He knows it now. Off-season program, he's there. Preseason, he's there. Regular season for all 17 games, you hope. So for Stefanski, he's got to find out how to use Deshaun Watson and the rest of the guys, Nick Chubb on offense, and get the most out of this offense. And Deshaun Watson how well he plays will, I think, be determined by what Stefanski does with him, the play calling, and in turn, that will lead the Browns either into the playoffs or out of the playoffs. And like I said, if they go, let's say they go 10-7, and that's not good enough to make the playoffs. They miss by a game or in a tiebreaker situation. Maybe Stefanski keeps his job, but if they're under 500 again and they don't make the playoffs again, then you're going to be looking for a new head coach and possibly somebody new in the front office as well.
That's fair. And the quarterbacks and head coaches are always tied at the hip in the NFL, and it's going to be that way. Kenny Roda, as always, man, thanks so much for the time and the insight. Appreciate it very much.
Great to see you again. Good to see we're still doing this after all these years, David Bacon.
Kenny Roda, make sure you check him out, WHBC. We're going to step aside, take one more time out. More from this special edition of Sports for CLE from the Great Lakes Collectors Convention here at Independence Fieldhouse. Stay with us.
Better days are ahead. Be ready with the training you'll need to get a great job. If you or your family has experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with full tuition assistance. Whether you want to improve your skills, get certified, or train for a new career, go to tri-c.edu to check out our programs and resources. So what are you waiting for? Register now for online and on-campus summer classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a line. A long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
COVID-19 has changed how we show up and show out with our family. Now it's time to take the first step that lets us get back to talking smack with the side of mac and cheese.
Before we can safely come together, we need the facts.
As COVID-19 vaccines become available, you may have questions.
Should I get it?
Is it safe?
Should I wait?
It's smart to question. Now, get the facts at getvaccineanswers.org so you can make an informed decision when vaccines are available to you.
Special edition of Sports for CLE from the Great Lakes Collectors Convention at the Independence Fieldhouse continues. And we are pleased to be joined by Jay Crawford, WKYC TV, and the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. Jay, appreciate it. Let's begin some Browns talk. Favorite acquisition of the offseason?
Wow. I think it would be Bubba Ventrone, just because I know him. And I can say that he and I coached to a championship together once. So he's definitely my favorite guy. It's a funny story. When Eric Mangini was the coach, he famously took all of the players to Connecticut on a nice little bus ride. Eric, I don't know if he still does it, but he is from Hartford, and he has a pretty sizable football camp every spring. And he would ask a bunch of his friends from the business, both TV and football, to come and help coach. And one year he asked my son and I, he knew Corey was an elite athlete and could teach speed, so he had Corey in, and we, at the end of the camp, we split up into 8 teams, and there were 8 coaching staffs, and it was Bubba, Corey, and myself. And we coached a team to the championship at the camp. So, you know, when Ventrone does lead the Browns to a Super Bowl, it'll be his second championship.
You mentioned that. What type of personality are they getting? And by all accounts,
Man.
I've heard him compared to a young Bill Cowher.
That is exactly right. And I haven't heard that. I've used that analogy myself on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. He is passionate. He is driven. He is an incredible overachiever. If you look at his career, he had to fight, scratch, and claw for everything he got. I think Bubba is earmarked to one day be a head coach. He's got all of the intangibles. He's obviously in the Belichick Mangini coaching tree. They loved him as a player. As soon as they saw him and what he brought, when you look at him, he doesn't blow you away as a guy that is going to tear people up physically. But when you watch him consistently, you see the heart and the effort is there. And that's what special teams really is all about. So I just think they got this so right. And I also think they got Jim Schwartz right, too. So I think they hit home runs on both of those. But I'm really excited about Bubba because, like I said, I think he's already got a nice track record. His special teams in Indy were among the league's best. I think he's going to duplicate that here. I love the fact that the Browns went out and actually signed guys that fit that mold. I think that's brilliant. So I think he's going to have among the best special teams now that he's here in Cleveland. And it takes time to build a career as that tracks as a coordinator and then a head coach when you're not a big name guy, and he wasn't, but neither was Bill Cowher.
Right.
So I think that's the perfect analogy. I think you're going to see his guys are going to play hard. They're going to play fast. And, on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show, we have Tyvis Powell as a regular, and he and DeQuell Jackson, and both of these guys have stressed throughout our discussions about Bubba. They set the tone. It's the first play of the game. It's the first play of the second half. And you can make a big hit, a big play on special teams, and it carries over. So I'm expecting that that's what's going to happen. I think that they're going to light a fire and spark the offensive and the defensive units. But if he does it again for a couple of years at Cleveland as a special teams coach, I can see him easily becoming a defensive backs coach or whatever, become a coordinator, and then ultimately, I think, a head coach. And I think he's going to be great at whatever he does. He's just a great guy, super hard worker, and I'm thrilled that we got him.
Yeah, the folks in Indy that I talked to at the Combine think he's destined to be a head coach pretty shortly. They think within a couple of years.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
You're a baseball guy. Let's turn our attention to the Guardians. When you watch this team, how much do you enjoy? I just, as a baseball guy, former college player, I like watching the way they play.
Yeah, they're fun. Last night was a perfect example of what they do. When it was 3-0, I thought, man, it might as well be 30-0, the way they've been hitting, lack of power. Josh Bell home run was great to see.
Yep.
He's got to get going. You can't have your protection hitter to your best player below 100. So it was good to see that he almost hit 2 last night. The double was high off the wall. So they're fun to watch. At times they're frustrating to watch too, just because the way the game has gone. I feel like when you're playing a team like the Yankees or the Astros or some of these teams that are built for the 3-run homer, it feels like you're diffusing a bomb the whole game. And that's stressful. That's very and on the flip side, that the Browns are working with a whole lot of firecrackers, and that's it. And we saw last year in a weak division, over 162 games, you can win a division that way. You can even beat the Rays in the playoffs that way. But when you have a series against the Yankees where the whole time you're diffusing the bomb, that gets stressful.
Right.
And eventually you touch a wire. And that's how they beat us. They beat us with the 3-run home run. So they're fun to watch. They're frustrating, though, because that they're not going to live off the 3-run homer. So you're holding your breath with every pitch that you don't give one of those up, because when you do, it makes it so much more difficult to come back and win. They're going to win a lot of low-scoring 1-run games. It's already been their MO this year. They've won a lot of 1-run games already. Last night was a great example of that. They can do that against a team like the Nationals. They're not going to do that on a consistent basis against the class of the league, though.
Yeah, that's an absolute fair assessment of it. They signed Gimenez to a 7-year deal. You got Jose Ramirez. You locked up Clase. You locked up Stefan. Do you kind of sense they're they're kind of revisiting that 90s thing where they're getting some of these young guys taken care of long term.
You were here.
Yeah.
You watched it at 43. You watched them slowly sign these guys to long-term deals. Now, what these contracts are, you know this, they're purchasing a lottery ticket already after you already know 3 numbers.
Yep.
We know the book cover and a few chapters. So John Hart wisely locked up all of those kids all at the same time, and that's what's key here. You can't stagger this development. You've got to look at the landscape and see when the iron is hottest and strike. And they could have done that 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. They waited, and I'm glad they did. I'm a huge opponent of signing anybody to a $30 million contract.
Yes.
We can't do that here. That's a death knell for this organization.
Yep.
I knew that they had to trade Frankie. I know the Mets are the Mets. They're flashy. They had to go for it. They did. I get it. He's one of many in that stratosphere that they have on that roster. But when you look at what the Guardians got out of it,
Yes.
and the fact that Rosario is probably next with a long-term deal,
Yep.
it's unbelievable what they got. They got 2 middle infielders, one at a Gold Glove, I'm not going to say MVP caliber, but certainly an all-star caliber.
Younger than Frankie.
Younger than Frankie, much cheaper than Frankie. If you put those deals side by side, you'd be crazy to take Frankie. And nothing against Frankie. He did what he wanted to do. He got paid. But we can't run the organization that way. I'm glad they're not. I hope I think Bieber's probably going to be next. He's just going to be too pricey. And when you look at the pitchers they have in the pipeline, and that's what they do,
Yep.
Gavin Williams' ERA is below 1
Yep.
in the minors. This Bybee kid hasn't
yep.
given up a run.
Both of them upper 90s. Stuff moves up in the zone.
I watched them in Goodyear, each of them,
Yep.
and was in awe. All I keep doing is shaking my head saying, where are they getting these guys? It's like they've planted a hidden pitcher tree behind their facility in that old graveyard where all the old dead airplanes are. I think there's a few pitcher trees planted out there, and these guys just keep falling off.
Yeah.
One is as good as the next. And I think they're the envy of Major League Baseball for that reason. They've got so much talent in the pipeline at the single most important position in baseball. So I think they're going to move on from Bieber. They'll make a decision, I guess, at the trade deadline and see where they are. It looks like Minnesota's the real deal. We've been waiting for them to get here. It looks like they're here. I wouldn't expect them to move him before the trade deadline, but obviously he has greater value if you do. But I want to see this team try to stick together and put a run together and see what they can do.
Yeah, it will be fun to watch, without question. They're a fun team to watch. You mentioned it. They can be frustrating, but they're going to be in most games with the way they pitch.
I hope so. I do. I really do. And I mean, obviously, we're looking at a bare-bones staff right now with the injuries. Plesac hasn't been good.
Young guys might be coming.
Yeah, I imagine that the way they're pitching already, I think it's June 1st when their clock starts.
Yep.
So typically, I know they waited with Frankie, and that made a lot of fans angry because the way it worked out, they only missed the playoffs that rookie year for Frankie by a few games. He could have made a difference if he was brought up in early May or late April. I don't know what they're going to do with these kids. I think they're ready. I really do. I'm obviously I have the benefit of the results of what they've done in the minor leagues and what they're doing this year. But when I watch a guy, I just look at the stuff. I'm sure you do the same thing. They both have 2+ pitches.
Yep.
And they're clearly working on their repertoire and trying to add a 3rd+ pitch. But if you have 2+ pitches in the big leagues, you might not be a front of the rotation guy, but you're a guy that can certainly help a club.
Yep.
And right now, with the injury to McKenzie, Plesac isn't pitching well. Cal doesn't look like Cal. I don't want to let this thing get away. And if you're talking about an extra year, if you wait until June 1st, if that's still even the date, I think it is, you know, I'm not a big fan of that. Just bring them up, start their clock. Who cares? You know, they're probably going to leave when they win a Cy Young anyhow. It doesn't matter.
Jay Crawford, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Jay.
Good to see you again, man.
All right, Jay Crawford, make sure you check him out, WKYC, also the host of the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. That's going to do it for this special edition of Sports for CLE. We will see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.